Let me see if I can. No, give me a second. I'm gonna.
This is great. We do a cyber seminar and we can't even make our own computers work. We're wonderful.
Well, I think the problem is everybody but me was sending out the invite, and so it double generated.
Oh, okay.
No.
There's Darla and Terry from our office.
Oh, hello.
Hi, Darla.
Good afternoon.
Okay.
We have 3 more minutes,
Yeah.
no, 2 minutes now.
People are.
I popped in early to make sure everything was set up right. No surprises.
Hey, Darla.
Hello.
Here's Chris.
There's Mr. Chris. Here comes Chuck.
Can you guys hear me or see me?
Chris?
Yes.
Yeah, I can see you and I can hear you.
Okay.
I can hear.
I can't see myself anymore, so I'm just making sure.
Oh.
I'm this little box in the corner of mine, and I'd like to stay that little box.
Janelle's getting in.
Mm-hmm. There's Christian behind her. He's
Oh,
the ghost
yeah.
back behind her there.
That doesn't look like Janelle, but.
All right, give it another minute here. I think
Yeah,
we're tracking.
Is now joining now. Where's your mute button on that?
Yeah, I'd like to just one administrative thing as we start. Just make sure that you're hitting mute when you're not talking, or we're gonna get this reverberation thing going on, if that's okay. And then also remember to unmute when you're speaking. It's a follow-up. We still have some more folks coming in, so we'll hold for just another minute. All right, I'll go ahead and kick it off. I'm Chuck Taylor. My mother calls me Christopher, and when she's not happy with me, it has Christopher in the middle name involved.
Yeah, name's Chuck.
So I'd like to just first of all say thank you to Cal James Ford's Insurance Group for hosting and sponsoring this, and I appreciate the Winning Tech and of course my Mantix 4 teammates and Cyber Hunter Solutions for all jumping in on this. It's a real pleasure to be with you today. I'm kind of honored to be able to do this with you and help moderate. I'm a retired Marine Colonel, and Mike McCoy, that many of you know, Floyd, and I go back in the Marine Corps many, many years. We're both retired colonels. But I've gone on to work with the Mantix 4 team and help do market development and sales. And so my first person to introduce is Dina James. Most of you know Dina. She's the co-founder, one of the senior leadership in the company, chief executive officer, and she brings decades of experience in the insurance industry and brings a tremendous amount of knowledge in the aspects of the industry and the policy sides of things, as well as the entire market. We have Chris Dudunsky with us, who's a co-founder and one of the people who put together the Mantix 4 team. He is also chief executive officer of and creator and the founder of a company, an outfit called Cyber Hunter Solutions, which is one of our technology partners. And it's great to have you here, Chris. Chris has spent decades at the highest level of cyber defense operations, and he's well known throughout the industry. We have Scott Lewis, who is co-founder and chief executive officer of Winning Technologies. They're out of St. Louis. And they, again, he brings a tremendous amount of more than 40 years in the business of IT and cybersecurity. And I'll finish up with, again, Mike or Floyd to me, McCoy. We've spent time in the Marine Corps together. He's since gone on to be a business leader and working in the insurance industry, as well as being a professional mentor and leadership coach and business coach out in the civilian world. So I'll just kind of start with a question, particularly the insurance leaders in here, because that's our preponderance of our group. I'm not looking for an answer now. We're going to circle back to this. But what are you hearing from your agents and customers regarding cybersecurity? What's the kind of barriers you're seeing in getting your end customers cyber insurance per se? And then with that, I hope this is going to be interactive. We'll proceed with the panel discussion, but we encourage you to put any questions you have in chat, and we'll try to bring those questions in as we can. And then at the end, we're going to hope to keep 20 minutes or so to do a quick engagement of your questions and more questions. But in between there, I'm actually going to come back to that question of what are you seeing in the insurance industry. So if we're good, I'm going to proceed forward to the first panel question. And that's really about, what are we seeing today and where is the cyber threat evolving? And Chris Dudunsky, I'm going to let you take that to kick off if you're okay, sir.
Sure. Yeah. So I think in general, what we see is that, typical methodologies that have been used for a long time are continued to be used by attackers, such as email phishing and exploiting vulnerable software and things like that. But I think one of the things that we certainly see is that they're getting a little sneakier in terms of how they do it. The attackers certainly disguise themselves much better than they used to. So they are blending in and they are learning and they are adapting quite quickly. And I guess I would say the volume of attacks is increasing substantially as we go along and continue to see things. There used to be a bit of a cycle in the season, and it just seems it's a sustained, continuous attack season, I guess.
All right, and then what about the barrier to entry kind of thing? The proliferation piece.
Yeah, so barrier to entry is something that is a lot easier today. There are kits. You can, it's almost press a button and get it done. Point and shoot is very possible today. You can actually even hire your own hackers to do things for you. So with cryptocurrency, that certainly makes that type of hiring anonymous, and or more so at least. So yeah, barrier to entry is almost disappeared, or has become a lot easier for the attacking community to get going.
And I'm going to follow that up with what are you seeing as far as the vulnerabilities and the kind of trend line of exposure to the threat?
Well, I mean, in general, I think there's more and more software that is getting complicated, crowded. There's a lot of software vendors out there, so there are a lot of things running on everybody's servers, in the cloud, on premise, on their workstations, their laptops. So I think software in particular, the more software, the more targets. That's really just something that's continuing. But as the attack surface grows, so does the potential for attack.
Yeah, I know we've talked about bring your own device and the remote working and so
Yeah.
forth, but but how do threat actors, how does that work? How do they actually do that? Because I don't want to get too technical, but people watch the movies and somebody, James Bond plugs in or whoever plugs in a USB stick, and they immediately take over an entire global corporate network and they steal all their stuff in 15 minutes. I mean, I know we all kind of laugh. It's kind of like Marines laughing at movies about Marines, right? So
Yeah.
can you just walk through on the Big Blue, like how does the phases of that thing look?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously spiced up a little bit for TV and movies, but it is relatively follows along the same pattern. Usually it starts with something called social engineering, which is I'm going to trick you into doing something that you shouldn't be doing. And I'm going to try to make you click something. I'm going to try to make you open something, or I'm going to try to make you plug something in. And then you're going to invite me into your environment where I will attempt to embed myself in your network and devices and move around and watch and learn and steal and all of those good things. So the method of entry usually starts with people. If I were attacking a corporation, I would certainly start with the employees. At some point, given the fact that people are working from home, they don't have their peers to talk to and say, hey, do you think this looks real? Does this look valid? There really is just a the social engineering effort is very sophisticated. The spoofing, the ability to pretend I'm somebody else, is very sophisticated and very real looking. So if there are not a lot of peers around to say that doesn't look right or that doesn't seem right, combined with the busyness and everybody's just overworked and overburdened with a lot of things to do, so there's not a lot of time to investigate personally when you take an action. So hackers really rely on busyness and just got to get things done quickly. So I'm just going to say yes to this. I'm just going to go ahead and do this.
All right, and so what I want to do here is shift to the kind of the risk impacts, and this is a business conversation and a cyber insurance kind of conversation. So I'd like to ask some of our insurance professionals and Dina and I'll call you Floyd Mike so everybody knows who you are. But if you can just if you want to kind of start with what are you seeing in the risk side of this as far as cyber insurance and the availability and the accessibility and the affordability. But what are you seeing in the insurance industry? And then I'll offer that out to, I can see we have a lot of insurance professionals in here to if there's any of y'all that have experienced stuff or you'd like to, this is the time I'd like to invite y'all to kind of join in this conversation. Just raise your hand and I'll answer to you.
Yeah, I think what we see the most right now is increased cost and limited markets. I think the biggest concern we have is that our clients don't understand the applications. They don't understand what the questions are. So they're answering, do you have MFA? Yes, of course we do, when they really don't. And they answer all of these questions because they want to look good for the insurance company, when in reality, they have a lot of old software and they're not up to date and they don't really have MFA, and they're allowing employees at home to use their home networks without any kind of VPN. And so we see a lot of that. And then these applications become warranties on policies. So when there's a claim, they don't have coverage because they didn't really have what they said they had. For us, I mean, even just filling out our own cyber application, I think it took us 2 weeks because we kept going back to our vendors saying, can we answer yes to this? If we can't, what do we need to do to fix it? MFA, which is multi-factor authentication, we cannot find a policy without it.
Okay,
And
Mike, did you want to?
I'm sure other ones have had the same experience or something similar.
Yeah, so I'll offer that out to Mike or anybody else who has any thoughts. Please jump in here if you want to talk about what you're seeing, if it's unique or even if it's the same kind of trends. If somebody doesn't jump in, I'm going to call you out. I'm going to go down the list and find somebody there. Yeah, I think Mike's got a technical piece here. So I guess the next question then for the insurance team out there is where do you start in this process? Like particularly for the insurance, your job is to help with the resiliency side of your clients, right? And so how do where do you start when it comes to getting cyber insurance for them?
The first hurdle is making them even aware of the fact that it's a needed commodity. Nobody likes paying insurance, including all of the agents on the call. None of us like buying it. But at least we recognize why we buy it. The general public thinks I just have email. I'm not really, that's all we use it for. They can't hack in and get to my, I have one client that says, well, all my social security numbers are in a file cabinet. That's wonderful. That's still cyber. Those things still can get hacked. So it's getting them to recognize that they need it and then getting them to fill out an application that's somewhere close to accurate and helping them walk through the questions and try to understand what the questions are asking. And then once we get that, then we use really good brokers. We also have some standard market carriers that will do it. And we just start there and then we read the forms and try to figure out what looks the best for the client. But the first hurdle is just getting them to recognize that that's even a need in their business.
And so part of our purpose with this outreach part is the education. And we started with in the insurance vertical with you and with your fellow Keystone teammates. And I think that we have a passion, particularly the folks who worked in the security lanes, of trying to get out there and how do we help the small businesses protect themselves. I have full confidence that the really large companies at least have a plan and know a way forward. The fact that they keep getting hacked and they keep getting ransomed is kind of disappointing. But so there's education to do in the medium to larges. But as we try to move this way, I'd like to offer Scott a chance to talk about how can the managed service industry, how can we help the customers and the insurance carriers as far as audits and figuring out what it is they have and what they need.
Yeah, so it really kind of goes back to the anatomy of a cyber attack. And everybody's at risk. There isn't anybody that out there that isn't at risk. And those anatomies come in multiple different forms. Everything from, like Chris was talking about, phishing attacks and man-in-the-middle attacks and things like that. You know, if you've ever gotten an email from yourself, then that's a problem. So, and that means that somebody has captured your email. Okay. So it really comes down to knowing your threat landscape, and more importantly, helping your customers understand what they're at risk for. You know, so the best way to start this is knowing what you have, right? So you have to know how you're set up, what are the risks that you face, and what controls can you put in place to do that. And I would start always with a technology audit, because if you don't have an owner's manual to your network and your systems, then you're behind the 8 ball already. So you need to really understand your business. You really need to understand what kind of threats are out there, and then put together a strategic plan around how do you put controls in place to help mitigate those risks, whether it's in your business or your customer's business. That's really the best way to start. You know, as far as what's going on, you know, we see all kinds of risks coming in and all kinds of interesting types of attacks, including artificial intelligence attacks, which are really powerful attacks. So if you're not basically fighting fire with fire, or your customers are not, you know, fighting fire with fire, then it really expands that threat umbrella that they face as a business. And it's going to limit what they can get as far as cyber insurance goes. So it goes deeper. MFA is one of the things, but it really goes deeper than that. It goes to education of the users. It goes to, you know, just automated controls, live monitoring, and responsiveness of your MSP, your managed service providers. So you really have to have a holistic view of your threat landscape as you move forward nowadays. Back to you, Chuck.
All right, so I agree. It's almost a set up question there, but so Scott and I, we know we obviously work together on a lot of these things, but what's the thought on the vendors and the things we're seeing with the vendors?
So when you say vendors, identify what you mean as a vendor. You mean like Microsoft or somebody like that?
Well, it like the supply chain attack pieces. We're seeing that people, like, if your company is a small business and you're a vendor to a larger business or a subcontract to a larger business, that seems to be where a lot of the attacks are coming at, as a backdoor into the big guys. You know, what's the significance of getting that audit and getting those pieces in place as an offset to risk, but also a business opportunity? I kind of throw that out there because when you go to somebody and say it's going to cost you this much, what's the value trade-off in getting that audit, of getting your insurance in place? What's that value look like to your prime?
Yeah, when it comes to, from an insurance perspective, and Scott not being an insurance person right up front, but having to deal with it on a routine basis, you know, there is what they call upstream and downstream. So depending on where you are in that, if you're the guy in the middle and you're going upstream to somebody else, to a vendor of yours, so I hack you, you go upstream, then who pays for that from a cyber insurance perspective? So those risks, I think, and Deanna can correct me if I'm wrong, would come back to the downstream person that got hacked. Would that be correct?
Right, yeah, that's the man in the middle type of attack where,
Yeah,
you know, the guy in the middle gets the hack. My client sent them an invoice. Their customer system got hacked and diverted payment to somebody else. So then my client got hurt, but there's no coverage for him in his policy. He needs to depend on his customer who actually had the attack. So cyber policies are weird, and boy, you better, it's like that's not gonna, we throw crime or technology crime or computer crime on policies every day, thinking that we've got this covered, but we don't if it's not our client that doesn't get hacked.
Right, right. And then on the downstream side would be where somebody downstream, one of your vendors got attacked, and then it affected you upstream from them. So, and most cyber insurance policies don't cover that, if I'm correct. So you have to make sure when looking at your cyber insurance policy that you're covering yourself for upstream and downstream attacks.
Right, and as the market has been harder and there's been fewer markets out there that want cyber, especially if you don't have a lot of controls on your system. Some of those things we just can't get right now. I have carriers say we're not doing it, we won't add it. Or I
Right.
have them say, I don't even know what you're asking me. That's the kind of people working in the cyber industry right now.
Yeah. And so what we see with the technology audits that we do anyway, is what we want to do is we want to come in, audit the current state of what you have, identify what controls that you have in place, whether that's MFA, firewall protection, but look a little deeper and go, how are you controlling upstream and downstream effectiveness? Because if we can show the insurance carriers that you've taken that into consideration in your strategic planning process, then that I think would help you get coverage or give coverage, depending on what side of the track you're on, to your customers and to yourself.
Right. Yeah. The better controls, the better coverage we can get.
All right, I'm gonna follow that up with a question. We in this group we have business and professional leaders. Chris, you've worked to help rescue some folks over the years. In fact, a lot of people. Scott and I know Dina and others. You've had clients who've been, breached or ransomed and so forth. You can talk for a second. What's kind of that implication on the risk side? And then what do you do? Like you're an insurance carrier and one of your clients gets hacked. So it's kind of it's a bit of a, what happened to him? And then what do you do about it? Hey, Dina, or Darla, I'm going to call you out because you're on the screen with me here, Darla. But hey, I just got hacked. What do I do? So what's that roadmap to mitigation, try to cut it down, and then what do you do after the fact?
Well,
How do you
after we
harden
take
up?
after we take a deep breath and make sure they have cyber coverage so that we have somebody to call, then most of the carriers have some sort of a reach out number, so they will help then clean up that phishing. If it's a phishing attack or they'll get online immediately with the client and start working with them to get this cleaned up so that we don't lose a lot of downtime. So thankfully, most of our carriers are really good about jumping on, taking care of the problem right up front. Then it ends up in the hands of cyber attorneys. And we wait and talk and beg and finally find out that yes, there's coverage, or no, there's not. It's a mess. There's nothing easy about a cyber attack, but those of us who have dealt with them in here, it's way easier when I've got them with a carrier that has that 800 number, that has that immediate help to them. We certainly limit our attacks, or we limit the expense of the attack. The attack still happens. We get it. Any of us could get one any day. It's really just a matter of opening an email that we shouldn't open. But we've tried to tell our employees here is if you open something that you think you shouldn't have opened, I mean, if you get that, oh shit moment, as soon as you open it, then call them, then call the MSP and tell them that we've got it so that they can stop it right now. And then if it goes further, then we're going to call the cyber carrier and we're going to get them to jump on board and help get that stopped. So it's just trying to recognize that there's a threat and that we've got to be really careful with it. But when our clients call us, we immediately jump on that phone. I mean, we're with the carrier immediately, getting them as much help as we can, putting them in touch with all the right people, the forensic people that'll come in and go through their computers and try to find out why this attack or why this hack occurred. And then we just hold their hands and try to walk through it with them. We do our best to give them good coverage, but even the best of coverage can cover everything.
All right, so that's kind of the lead up to, okay, they got hit. So how do you mitigate that? And I'm going to ask Chris, because I know that we've worked with you on numerous cases of, okay, we help. Sometimes they may or may not pay out. Sometimes there's all those pieces, but it turns into, how do you, what happens with the how do you save their data? What do you do afterward to harden them up? And I think that there's a piece of, hey, great, we got through it. Woo, we're back to business as usual. So what's your your recommendation to go forward after that?
Yeah, it's a long conversation on that, but I think the one thing is I would follow up what Dina was saying and just say everybody should have an incident response plan. So where they walk you through all of these things, what to do when the breach has started, how do you continue, who do you communicate with, it's effectively a coordination of activities for various stakeholders to do things and have communication plans. But in the end, then there's a lessons learned as well. So once you have all the information on what has happened, how it happened, you really have to learn from it so that you can tighten things up a bit better. One of the things, it really depends on the type of attack, but, I have been talking for many, many years about improving visibility. It's really about understanding. One of the things Scott said earlier is understanding what you actually have, where is it? And then you start looking at other ways, can you protect it? If you can't protect everything and you cannot, then you have to fall back on detection, which is logging and monitoring and auditing of things that are happening. And if you see something in the logs or the audit logs, is there somebody actually responding to that? Because the whole system fails when, you A, don't know where something is, B, you can't protect it, C, you didn't log anything or you didn't even see the attack, and therefore you didn't respond to the attack. So then ultimately you're going to have to be in a recovery situation. So really it starts from the beginning, which is really identification of what you have and what you're trying to protect. Then you have a properly balanced protection plan that gets put in place, and you follow that up with proper visibility. So detection and response, those things are essential. If you have digital assets and you have identified them and you have protected them as best you can, you need to have somebody just really watching the hen house, so to speak, and make sure that all the activities are understood and you respond appropriately when you see something that makes you go, And, when it all fails, you have to fall back on that incident response plan and follow the steps like a franchise recipe. I mean, it has to be just the same all the time, and you have to, but it does evolve as your company grows and as you deploy new assets and you grow to different locations, you will have an evolution of that incident response plan and different activities. When you maybe transition from private to a public company, you've got different responsibilities for communicating and notifying law enforcement. There's a whole host of things to be done. But the lessons learned from my perspective is extremely important, because you should really only get hit once before you'd never get hit by it like that again. If you get hit with the same technique over and over again, you're not really learning your lesson. So
Yeah, in the military, we call it lessons relearned. You know, there are very few new lessons learned. It's like ow, stop that. Okay, stop that again. Ow, you know. So
Mhm.
I guess the thought though is, and this is one of the challenges that I think you're going to see in the cyber insurance lane as an insurer, is most small businesses don't know what they have. They can't. It's cost prohibitive, and a lot of them don't even know what their risk is. I mean, we spend money to defend ourselves based on a risk. You know, you insure for life events or business life events, and so you know, I know we talk about managed services. I'll just give a pitch on this, that if you look at insurance, it's shared risk, right? You're paying to outsource your risk, to offset your risk, right? You're paying somebody to absorb your risk. The managed services lane, I'll offer this to Scott and or Chris, is like, how does that allow a scaling, you know, thing with an integrated full, you know, it's like you have these pieces of the coverage you need, you know, you may need this part, you need that part or whatever. How does that make sense to small businesses?
Well, I'll take that one and then I'll pass it off to you, Chris. But I think that's the beauty of what we're trying to do here as far as an educational perspective, but at the same time, show a path for people to fix themselves and moving forward. And I think that's where Mantix 4, Cal James Forge, and Winning Tech have all come together and put together a cyber plan that the Mantix 4 processes get installed on the customer's networks and systems. And that's the tool that is kind of doing the blocking, the tackling, uh, making sure that things are alerting, making sure that the controls are functioning properly. And then if they aren't, or if there's an anomaly that happens, what happens is Mantix 4 will trigger an alert, which will then trigger an alert in the Winning Technologies Security Operations Center, where we'll then take a look at what those alerts are, assess the risk, and then put up the defenses if there aren't any in order to protect the network so that somebody's always watching. And then on the backside of that is where Cal James Forge comes into play as the cyber insurance. And so we've really come together to try to put together a holistic package. And I know that there's other partners on this call, but this program is available to all of the partners that want to be involved. So, Chris, do you want to talk more about how the Mantix 4 watches those controls to make sure that they're functioning?
Yeah, so that's it's a good question. So we really, in order to see a lot of threats, you have to look at things from a lot of different angles. So, we in Mantix, we call them different lenses of information. Because a lot of the you can imagine that when we gather all this information about what's going on in your environment, it's a mountain of information. So what we need to do is we need to filter it, and we need to sort it, and we need to analyze it, and we really need to look at it from a whole bunch of different angles to build context around what we're seeing. So it starts at watching network traffic. So who is communicating and where they're going. Is it normal? Is it abnormal? Is it malicious? Or is it just kind of unknown? We look at the behavior of all the computers, whether they're servers or laptops or workstations, and we gather all that information as much as possible, as much as is reasonable, and there's a proper balance for everything. Also, I need to say, it's not just put your arms around, and get millions and millions of bits of information every second. There is a balance depending on the level of risk that your organization really has to absorb. Whether you're a company of 10 or a company of 10,000, depending on what you do, you might have an equivalent level of risk, and that's going to dictate the proper balance of security, of visibility, of detection capability, of protection capability, of responsive, whether you need 9x5 or 24x7 watchers looking over everything. It's a long, it's almost like how long is a piece of string, unfortunately. But there is that's why we're here. We're trying to tell you, well, it's this long, and this is what we recommend based on what we see.
Yeah, and that's where in my opinion, that's where the technology comes into play. Exactly what Chris is talking about is you have to put in reasonable controls. Okay. You don't want to overspend and waste money on controls that don't apply to you. But at the same time, you want to make them financially reasonable, but yet meet the minimum, or at least meet the minimum requirements that are coming out from the insurance carriers. So it's a balancing act of what do you need, what are your real risks, and then putting controls in place to manage those particular risks based on your business and your customer's business. And then you hopefully come up with something that the insurance carriers will insure. Dina, what do you think?
And actually pay for. Yeah, and actually pay the claim.
That's the helpful part.
That's
Yes.
the goal in the end of all of this for all the insurance people is just get the claim paid.
I'll throw in on the balance piece, and we've had these analogies of how hard do I have to be? If I want to be 100% protected, I just need to unplug everything from the internet. Well,
Right.
That's really not reasonable. You can't do business. So how hard do you got to be? And I know that Scott, you were talking about whose house are they going to rob? You know, the house with a real security system and cameras and a couple big dogs and maybe a sign on the front window that says if you can read this, you're in range. Or the people who don't have a dog, leave their lights off, don't mow their yard. I mean, who are they going to hit, right? The analogy I've always seen is that they're going down the road, they try to hit, ooh, they're looking a little tough. The criminals are in a business to make money as fast as they can. So it's you got to be hard enough to protect yourselves, but you got to have the right configuration for your insurance to pay out as well. You can't be just barely enough. You have to have the right mix, the right balance in there. That was my last pitch.
Yeah. Well, you made a good, you kind of touched on it, Chuck, is that when it comes to cybersecurity and countermeasures and the attack process, the one thing that the attackers have that you don't have is time. Okay. So they will, in some cases, work your systems for a year or more before they ever actually initiate an attack. Okay. So they could be on your system, probing, touching, learning, some of the countermeasures that you have and so forth. And this, I think, and Chris can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this is what the real power of Mantix 4 is that it'll reach into the areas that you don't normally look at and you don't normally monitor and try to pull out what you don't know about your network and who's on it and who's doing what. And that's where the real risk is because standard antivirus and MFA and just routine monitoring doesn't necessarily mean that you know what's going on. There's things underneath the blanket that you need to really try to pull out and expose. And in my opinion, that's where the power of Mantix 4 comes into play. Am I on track there, Chris?
Yep. No, for sure. That is one of the things that we focus on, really, trying to shine the light a little bit into the dark corner that is not looked at very often, or if ever. It's usually, the persistence that exists inside when an attacker attacks successfully, they like to plant themselves inside the network and hang on, and they like to hide, and they sit and they listen and they watch, and eventually they just blend in. So if people aren't looking for it, they're there and you just don't know it. And that's what we try to identify is we try to look for those, we'll call them post breach. So you've already been breached, you just don't know it because no one has attacked you yet, but there's already somebody inside. So it's a post breach evidence that we are looking for. Because if there is a piece of malware or someone is on a machine somewhere inside your organization, they're really not doing anything other than just sitting there. What happens is these things say, hey, I'm here, I'm on this machine, and they call home. And it could be every 5 seconds, it could be every 55 minutes, it could be every day. They just call home and say, I'm still here, what do you want me to do? Anything? Nothing? Okay. And it's very hard to see that sometimes. So, that is one of the areas that we certainly focus on at Mantix is trying to identify those sorts of things.
Yeah, and we've even had experience with some artificial intelligence attack, what the industry kind of terms attack artificial intelligence. We've had a little bit of experience with that because we're starting to see it. It's not very prevalent at this point, but it's the kind of the future of attacks where, and this is one that we were involved in, and we captured the logic of this artificial intelligence, and it was actually going out without any human intervention and doing Google searches and things like that to try to learn about the defenses that it's running into. And then it would modify its own attack profiles in order to take a different approach. It's like having two driveways. So this driveway is blocked, so I'm going to go, where's another driveway? And so the sophistication of some of the attacks that were at the kind of leading edge of seeing, but will come quickly because Elon Musk embraced us all with a very easy artificial intelligence program. But so I think it's going to really start to expedite that type of stuff. And that's where, being able to respond quickly. The human, as we go through, we check logs, we do those types of things. That's not something that happens almost instantaneous. It takes time. And again, this is the power of the Mantix 4 process is that it's learning as it continues to operate and grow and normalize your traffic. So it very quickly identifies what is normal traffic versus abnormal traffic, and then can put up barriers to block that abnormal traffic, or at least contain it until a human actually has the opportunity to look at it. And so, again, this is part of the entire program that Winning Tech and Cal James Forge and Mantix 4 have all put together. And so here we are today trying to teach everybody about what the threats are and the options that we have to protect ourselves and our customers. Back to you, Chuck.
All right, sir. So we're down to about 15 minutes. I see all these hands raised with a bunch of professionals that have questions. Actually, right now, I think people are either stunned or we've answered your questions, but I would like to offer it out there. It could be anything you want to talk about or concerns you have as in the insurance industry or as business professionals. I'd like you to just, if you have anything or any questions, you can raise your hand or just speak up. I'll give you a minute or two here. And Dina, you could tell some of your people to ask questions if nothing else.
Oh, there you go. Well, I guess, we've been a part of an attack. Wasn't because we were vulnerable at all. It was a vendor that was, but it still caused downstream problems. We still had to make changes in our system so it couldn't happen again or shouldn't happen again. We had to tighten some things up. We had to do things so that we didn't lose our contract with our vendor. So, because we're a vendor for them, this other company was a vendor for us. And when they got attacked, it just kind of got this big triangle of a mess. And I know it took weeks for us to settle people back down again and prove that we were good to go and that we had secured their data better. I can't even imagine what it would be if they got into our insurance software and were able to start taking social security numbers, driver's license numbers, dates of birth, get into the benefits database and start grabbing medical information. And that's basically why we have reached out and really have 4 levels of security now. I mean, our employees get training once a month for cyber hacks. We get phishing emails all the time telling us what to be watching for. We get test emails to see if we're paying attention. So, we've done that, and then we've got our IT people that do, the base bottom line stuff. Then Winning Tech watches that, and then Mantix 4 watches that. And so we've got kind of a 4-level system, and I can't tell you we'll never be breached, but I can tell you we're better than we were 2 years ago.
This is so I have a question from the audience, and it's are cyber monitoring services a nice to have or a gotta have to be able to get cyber insurance coverage, to be able to, well, and I'd expand that a little bit of accessibility and affordability.
Yeah.
So what is your take on that? And I'll offer that to Dina and the insurance professionals.
It certainly helps. Everything that I can, if you can send them a list of everything you've done inside your system, and the carrier now knows that they have gone the extra mile to make sure this is really secure, number one, your price isn't going to go up near like it is. I mean, our price barely went up because we have done everything we need to do to try to protect our system. So our prices stayed low. Well, I've had other clients whose prices have doubled or tripled because they don't do anything different. And then they have an attack and then they still don't fix it. So from our point, it is nice to have. I mean, I'm glad we have it. It also has kept our own costs down.
Right. And then any other thoughts or comments on that?
Well, from a managed service provider's perspective, I think it's always good to have proactive monitoring. Because again, as we've talked about several times today, it's the things that you don't know that are going to come back and bite you. And nobody knows everything. And threats are always evolving. But from an insurance carrier's perspective, have you put reasonable controls in place? I think is really kind of the key to it. And if you can show those, like our audits, we write them in a manner that fits the industry standard of auditing, technology auditing. And so we have clients that we do an annual audit for. And when their insurance company comes knocking about renewals on their cyber insurance, they just give them our audit, and it lines out for them what their network is, where things are, how is it secured. And it becomes a relatively easy process once you understand the questions that the insurance company is asking you to get cyber insurance renewed, or if you're a first timer, getting it for the first time, which I think is actually become harder is the first time policy writer. So
it's certainly
Deanna?
become harder to get good coverage. We can get some basic stuff that might be a little stripped down initially. And then once they get better controls in place, then we can usually start adding some other stuff to it. But I know I've had clients turned down simply because they don't have multi-factor authentication. I mean, they just aren't going to do it.
And so I think, Scott, you kind of touched on the risk perspective. We call it known and unknown risk. And if you don't know what your risk is, you can't manage the risk. And nobody wants the insurance against unknown risk and unmanaged risk. And I think that's a critical part when you start talking about insurance. How much does it cost, and then how much you're gonna pay for
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, and that's what, you know, and that's what we're seeing, at least on the MSP side and the consulting side, is, you know, you insure actually more against the unknown than the known, because the known you can put controls in place
That's right.
in order to protect yourself. It's the unknown stuff, the evolving threats that become more difficult to handle. The other big thing is, and I mean, this would be a better question for Deanna to answer, but, you know, I call them the self-inflicted wound. Okay. So somebody brings in a flash drive from home and plugs it into a computer on the corporate network. Okay. Does the insurance company consider that a self-inflicted wound or not? Because I've seen where insurance companies have denied coverage for an event because of that. They considered it a self-inflicted wound and the policy didn't cover that. So, you know, how far are they taking that? If you click on an email, if you click, you know, bring something in from home, you know, where's that line drawn? And from a cyber insurance perspective, I think that it's important that people know where that line is. Is that, what do you think, Deanna?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's why we try to always read a form and explain to the client what the exclusions and the parameters are around their policy, and explain that the application becomes a warranty. So you better tell me the truth. Don't try to sugarcoat anything in your app. Always always be straightforward. If you don't know how to answer the question, write out your explanation and let the carrier then read that and ask questions. It's trying to be just as upfront as possible so that we don't get caught with those back end exclusions that nobody expects. I mean, we expect that this is going to cover us if somebody brings in a bad flash drive and throws it in a computer. Now, we're not supposed to be putting flash drives in computers, but I also don't see 30 people every day. So I don't know if that's happening or not. It's just trying to educate employees, and then it's the same thing with our clients. It's trying to educate them to get them to educate their employees so that we reduce the risk. We all have a risk of a tornado. We all have a risk of an auto accident. We all know that. We also, every one of us, have a risk of a hack. It's not really if, it's probably more when that we'll all get something. It's catching it early and taking care of it quickly, and then hoping and praying you have cyber insurance that might help if it gets out of hand.
So, Deanna, you said something that just kind of stuck in my head a second ago. So, are carriers starting to require formalized educational programs for employees as part of the cyber insurance coverage?
Not yet. Not okay. I'm going to preface that by saying most of our clients are small businesses, small to medium-sized businesses. And so from that corporate level, no. We had one that needed to go from 3 million, I think, to 5, and they had to then go in and do remote access multi-factor authentication. So the carriers are looking at it, and as the limits get higher, then it seems like the requirements get tougher. And I will say that going from 3 to 5 doubled my premium. It didn't go up, and every insurance professional knows that it's supposed to get cheaper as you go up. Cyber does not do that. It just gets more expensive.
So then I
At
would
least that's what
offer,
we're seeing. I mean, that's our, and I would be happy to hear anybody else's. I mean, we're just all trying to learn this together, I think, right now.
I'd like to offer that to the other cyber professionals in this call. If you'd like to just please jump in if you wish. we're getting out to a wrap up here, but I'd like to go ahead and offer that getting left of bad is what our objective is. And if they do get past that, we've hopefully mitigated that. So with that, I'd like to offer an invitation to the other professionals out here. If you have any questions, please reach out to us. We'll send a follow-up email out with our contact information for the different teammates. And if you'd like to, please reach out to us, and we're more than happy to help you out. And if you have sales teams or other folks that want to engage and learn a little bit, we're willing to talk them through the not too technical side, but at least to know how to talk about it. And lastly, I'll offer it back to you to Dina. And again, thank you for your great hospitality. I'll let you have the closing comments.
Okay, well, I just want to thank my team that joined us, but mostly the Keystone Group that was willing to give up an hour of your time. We're just trying to learn about this ourselves. We want to offer you, if you've got questions on how we've got our set up, by all means ask. We're just here to help everybody else out. I think we're all trying to learn the best way to handle cyber and the best way to handle our clients. And we're stronger together and better together. So we just thank you for joining us. We really do want your feedback. So give it to me, good, bad, or indifferent. We just want to know if this was helpful and how we can make it even better. So with that, we'll let you go because it's like right now, oh, we're 2 minutes early. So
Yeah.
we're good.
So, yeah, sorry to interrupt, Deanne, but
Nope,
this conference has been recorded, and it'll be available on the Winning Tech website probably tomorrow if you have somebody that missed it or wants to watch it.
great.
All right, with that, thank you all.
Thanks,
Go back
guys.
to work now.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Okay.
Do you want me to go ahead and push out a follow-up?
Yeah, what I'll do is I'll get the